The World Game Podcast will explore the architecture of Bitcoin using the framework of architect and polymath Buckminster Fuller, better known as Bucky. You may be surprised to hear me say that there are uncanny similarities between the work of Bucky and Bitcoin. Is it just a coincidence? For me, this was a fascinating question I could not stop thinking about. Eventually, I came to the conclusion that Bucky's work is an effective gateway to understand why Satoshi shared the Bitcoin protocol with the world. Once you grasp how big of an idea Bitcoin is, it's hard to imagine how Satoshi was able to conceptualize it. I believe Bucky's work played a role. According to his own words, Bucky spent his life exploring the architecture of the universe. He tirelessly worked on communicating a future where individuals or teams collaborated or competed to make the world work for 100% of humanity through spontaneous cooperation without the ecological offense or disadvantage of anyone. He called this the world game, an antithesis of world war. World war is finite and zero-sum, whereas world game is perpetual and positive-sum. The two are different and necessarily have different accounting systems. One is exclusive, opaque, and corruptible, while the other is permissionless, transparent, and immutable. One system is congruent with universal properties, the other is not. There is evidence that while exploring the architecture of the universe, Bucky discovered Bitcoin, the idea, and time-locked it into the future so that it would be available when we inevitably needed it. He knew his work would likely remain dormant for about 50 years, but understood the existing system was eventually insolvent. A new accounting system tied to our physical reality through time and energy could eventually be necessary to avoid a potentially terminal global conflict. Bucky called this a global time-energy accounting system. Today, we are living in that future, and we call this system of accounting the Bitcoin network. Satoshi may or may not have been familiar with Bucky's work. That is not for me to decide. Either way, it does not change anything about the Bitcoin network. Satoshi did, however, knowingly or not, follow Bucky's playbook to a T. They both foresaw concerns with the direction the world was heading, built a solution to the problem, shared it with the world, and walked away. This behavior follows a design philosophy Bucky described as a comprehensive, anticipatory design science. Bucky and Satoshi both understood that had they come out and tried to explain Bitcoin, no one would have listened. We struggle to understand invisible and abstract concepts. Today, the Bitcoin network exists, and people still don't understand it. So just imagine trying to talk about it before the technology was in place. There is a saying, people understand Bitcoin on a need-to-know basis. Bucky called this process emergence by emergency. People will only search for a tool once they have identified a problem. Bucky and Satoshi both understood this and made sure a tool was available once people came to realize the problem. Preaching about Bitcoin before the problem was tangible would fall on deaf ears. They both knew it was only a matter of time. Furthermore, key to their philosophy is an imperative that the message be separate from the messenger. The political system is incapable of adopting a tool that another party created, no matter how desperate it may be. Bucky and Satoshi understood that there could be no messenger, there could only be a tool. Bucky also understood that humanity succeeding was paradoxically a threat to certain power structures that could profit from the existing system of cyclical violence. He understood humanity had one shot at transitioning out of the existing system. He needed a sly roundabout way to share his discovery, and found that by talking and writing in an obscure and future tense, he was able to avoid directly threatening those in power. Understandably, a distant and abstract change is not as threatening. His solution was to use something tangible that people could relate to and understand. His clever solution was to use a house. Everyone understands what a house is. He insisted invisible concepts needed to be physically applied for people to understand them. He essentially broke up the Bitcoin network into a futuristic vision of housing, knowing someday someone like Satoshi Nakamoto would connect the dots. His critics mocked him for never getting any of his inventions mass-produced, but little did they know that was not the point. He was building a conceptual framework for the Bitcoin network. It was a form of applied philosophy. He understood his work would likely remain dormant until someone sufficiently motivated with the necessary technology could piece it together. To quote, "It is absolutely necessary that someone or some group of people translate the many abstract truths into the realm of the conscious spheres of material things, as the mass of the world knows them. It will little benefit the world so long as philosophers remain in abstract discussion of their problems."